Alright, the original Larry Ellison series, parts 9, 10, maybe 11, 12. How long we got left? What are we up to? Hope you're enjoying the show so far. I'm going to upload these all in order. So you can watch them in order at your leisure then. I'm doing the whole thing all in one run.
Video, we talked about Larry Ellison's secret wife, who nobody knew about, a football deal that revealed everything, and how the only two people who can verify Jolynn's existence are Dave Portnoy and an alleged college roommate who no one can seem to reach. Now, if you're just tuning in and you have not seen the previous video, that is unfortunately required reading, so go back and watch that and then come back. And for the rest of you, oh my god, what I found today has connected so many dots that go so much deeper than I ever could have imagined. Oh my god. Everything I talk about in this video is also going to be posted on the Drey Dossier, my Substack. The link is in my bio. I am telling you, do not rely on this video staying up long. Let's start with talking about some numbers that don't really add up to me. Okay, so the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor specifically, not Dearborn, not Flint, but Ann Arbor is at the center of our story. Yes, it's where Larry Ellison's secret wife allegedly went to school, and it's where her roommate Anju got his PhD in nuclear engineering, but it's also the center of a national security scandal that happened this year. So it started in 2023 when 5 Chinese students from the University of Michigan's joint program with the university in Shanghai all got caught photographing military installations and were arrested for espionage. The Trump administration decided to use them as a bit of a case study, in order to do a massive crackdown on student visas, specifically targeting Chinese students in critical fields like AI, nuclear science, and engineering. And then that's when our man Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, started revoking visas left and right, and he was personally signing deportation orders if social media accounts for students didn't fall in line. And this crackdown obviously had a drastic effect on universities who had big international programs. I mean, we're talking about schools who were projecting that they could lose 30 to 40% of those international students. That is hundreds of millions of dollars of tuition revenue just gone. And then, right in the middle of all of this, in June 2025, the University of Michigan had let's call it a string of bad luck. To start, on June 4th, the Department of Justice announces the arrest of 2 Chinese nationals, both of whom are connected to the University of Michigan. They were caught with this fungus that the DOJ said was a potential agro-terrorism weapon. Then, 4 days later, another arrest, this time a PhD student from Wuhan, yes, that Wuhan that everybody associates with COVID, was caught smuggling in biological materials. Then, 2 days after that, another arrest. 3 arrests in 1 week. All of them Chinese nationals, all of them described as having smuggling in some sort of biological weapons, all connected to the University of Michigan. Now that doesn't sound so good, right? I mean, it sounds scary even. So I decided to look into it a little bit further to see how so many people were being allowed in with these biological weapons of war. And that's when I learned something that gave me pause. You see, that first guy that they had announced, he was caught in July of 2024, not June 2025. They had arrested him almost a full year before they decided to announce it to the public. Yeah, so he was arrested under a different administration, mind you, because 11 months ago, that would have been Joe Biden's administration. So why did they announce it in June as if it had just happened? And then when you read past all of the scary headlines buried at the bottom of these articles, you'll see that plant pathology experts actually went on record as saying that this fungus that was brought in was likely not an act of agroterrorism. They said that it was on the lower end of the spectrum of risk. One expert even said that the fungus is in the same general group as yeast, to make beer or bread, that it's a normal agricultural science. So maybe that's why the Biden administration decided not to tell us 11 months ago when he was arrested, because they found out that it wasn't actually that big of a deal. That was just out of precaution that they arrested him. But interesting how a new administration decided to weaponize that. So since the University of Michigan seems to be this hotbed for problematic international students, I decided to look up its enrollment numbers to see how badly it was affected during this crackdown. But what I found instead shocked me. While universities across the country were watching their international student numbers just decimate, the University of Michigan's Ann Arbor international student applications weren't just unaffected by it, They increased. Yeah, I know. So I went and looked at the University of Michigan, Flint. Their numbers decreased. The University of Michigan, Dearborn, their numbers decreased. Michigan State University, everybody's Michigan numbers had decreased except for the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So you're telling me that the one school that was disproportionately unaffected by this crackdown just so happens to be the same school that Larry Ellison's secret wife attended? Okay. So I'm asking myself, like, how much money does Marco Rubio owe Larry Ellison? You know, and as it turns out, a lot. It just so happens that I stumbled across some bombshell breaking news, okay? Yesterday, somebody had submitted leaked emails to DDO, my favorite website of all time. Oh, God bless you, DDO. These emails are from 2015, and they're between Larry Ellison and Ron Prosser. Now, Ron Prosser today is Israel's ambassador to Germany, but during the time of these emails in 2011 to 2015, he was their ambassador to the UN. Now, at the time, Rubio was a very strong challenger in a GOP presidential field that would ultimately include underdog candidate Donald Trump. And I'm going to read them out loud to you in a second here, but first I just have to say it brings me so much joy that emails that are 10 years old were just leaked yesterday. You know, I'd like to think that maybe whoever leaked them watches this series and they felt inspired. Because at the end of the day, that's what this series is all about, you know? Finding different ways to exploit a man who doesn't want to be online by putting him as online as possible. April 26, 2015, Ron Prosser emails Larry Ellison. The subject line is Rubio's speech. And it's worth noting that this is 1 week after Marco Rubio had launched his presidential campaign with a speech where he had criticized the Obama administration for what he was calling hostility towards Israel. Prosser asks Ellison to send him a copy of Marco Rubio's speech. And then the next day, on April 27th, Prosser and Ellison are emailing back and forth after a dinner that they had like the previous night. Prosser writes, "I had a great time with you last night. You know, time always flies when I'm with you." And then Ellison responded with, "I had a great time too, Ron. I'm looking forward to the next time." It's some real fan fiction type shit here, okay? But then he adds as a postscript, "I'll tell you how dinner with Senator Rubio goes." And then on April 30th, Ron Prosser sends a follow-up email to Larry Ellison saying, "How was the conversation with Mario Rubio?" I think he means Marco Rubio, obviously. "Did he pass your scrutiny? Did you have a chance to talk about Israel? Would love to chat." Then, a few hours later, Larry Ellison responds with, "Hi, Ron. Great meeting with Marco Rubio. I set him up to meet with Tony Blair. Marco will be a great friend for Israel." There it is, folks. Everybody laughed last year when I said that Larry Ellison was running this country. And if Tony Blair sounds familiar to you, it's because he's the one that Trump announced as being the head of the board of the peace unity thing between Gaza and Israel. It's all bullshit, right? He's administering the reconstruction of Gaza. And many of you may recall that a few days ago, I actually made a video showing you all of the plans for all this new tech utopia city stuff that they were going to put in to the fallen Gaza. They're going to turn it into the blockchain city. Oh, and just because I know you're probably wondering, Larry Ellison did end up donating $5 million to Marco Rubio's presidential campaign, and it ended up representing 1/5 of all of the money that Marco Rubio's super PAC raised during the entire primary. So you could say that it went well. So now we've got this kind of clear line, you know, of interests serving interests. So you've got Ellison vetting Rubio for Israel interests. And then he connects him with Tony Blair, who Ellison has funded to the tune of $350 million at this point. And it was strategic because even though Rubio didn't end up winning, he was still put in a very important position as Secretary of State. And now 10 years later, he's the one who's making sure that visas are revoked for every other university for international students, except for the one that Larry Ellison needs. And that brings us all the way up to Anjou. And it looks like I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to make another video about it. I'm sorry, don't hate me. I found the leaked emails. I had to tell you guys about it today. It was breaking news. But I promise, the next video is going to be all about Anjou, okay? It's going to pull the whole thing together, the Ellison Institute, the nuclear reactors. It's going to be a whole thing. It'll be great. And by...
Right, now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to throw another video in by somebody else. I've done a recording of it here. Recording of a recording, do we really want that? Probably not. Right, we'll go like this. We'll go. History never repeats. Well, it's about to. Tell myself, na 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 Okay.
Flight Centre's UK and Europe sale is on. Hurry, ends 1 March.
Flight Centre, your centre
This
for
is
travel.
by
Vision Christian Radio, uplifting music, engaging real-life stories and encouragement.
Hope you got...
This is by Wally, Rashid. Okay. Now, I think that should be about right there. We in view, we sure are. Okay.
guys are doing well. So this is pretty shocking.
That's Larry Ellison there. 81 years old. Pretty much running the White House.
The guy who's currently in the process of purchasing TikTok, billionaire Larry Ellison, is also going to be behind the scenes, heavily involved in the running and the operations of Gaza, even though he's not on the board of peace. Well, how is that really happening? It's because there are shady stuff going on behind the scenes that nobody's really talking about. And of course, it has to do with none other than an individual that's very close to the Trump administration and the Trump family in general, Tony Blair here. So Tony Blair is going to be on now the Board of Peace for Gaza. The Board of Peace, it's truly putting Palestinians first, obviously, which is why there's no Palestinians on this board whatsoever. Netanyahu is, though, but not a Palestinian. And Tony Blair here is going to be on this board, and he was heavily involved in basically the concoction of the war in Iraq. And Tony Blair has the Tony Blair Institute. He runs a massive nonprofit organization that's focused on helping developing countries and spreading democracy. You know, who makes himself look like this really good elite class individual. Well, there's one issue here. And the issue is that Tony Blair's entire institute runs entirely on millions and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Looks like the love child of Tommy Lee Jones and the Cat in the Hat.
Bankrolled by none other than Larry Ellison. So the guy, the largest private donor to the IDF, by the way, billionaire Larry Ellison here, completely bankrolling Tony Blair's institute. Completely, 257 million. Actually, here, let me just quickly pull up some stats. Based on reports from 2025, the billionaire founder of Oracle, Tony Blair, pledged on donating over 257 million pounds, so $350 million to the organization. Now, here's the thing. This part's really important. Pledged to donate. He already donated about a third of that already, so almost around 100 million he's already donated. Here's the thing though, he didn't send the rest of the money yet. Now why is that important to understand? Because of the fact that it's pledged money that Tony Blair is going to be getting in the future. That means that Tony Blair's Institute has to be acting in a way that's in line with Larry Ellison. Because Larry Ellison is clearly donating to this institute on the expectation that the institute is going to be heading in a way that he deems acceptable. And, well, now, isn't that a great way to control somebody? Because a guy's entire institute is waiting on a $250 million deposit, already got a third, and that $250 million deposit is coming from Larry Ellison, the largest private donor to the IDF, while now, all of a sudden, Tony Blair is appointed on the Board of Peace for Gaza. So you guys are starting to see the conflict of interest here. The conflict of interest is that there's a billionaire that has control over the finances of this man, and we're going to expect this man. Of course we know he's a bought out POS. He's just completely working for the interests of Israel. We already know that, but it just goes to show the depth of this. If he does anything, and he's not going to because he's already a staunch Zionist anyways. But if he does anything to go out of line with what the billionaire elite class wants, which he's a part of, then his institute's going to have a major problem because they're waiting on $250 million. And they're not going to get it unless they make sure that Larry Ellison is happy. So it really didn't matter. It really didn't matter whether or not Larry Ellison's on the Board of Peace because he already is. He inadvertently is. Because of the fact that Tony Blair is on the Board of Peace. And Larry Ellison and Tony Blair are like this. Because Tony Blair is the puppet of Larry Ellison. So anything that Larry Ellison wants, the way he envisions Gaza, the surveillance, the AI surveillance that they're conducting in Gaza, the massive amount of influence now that Larry Ellison's going to have in Gaza, is shocking, and nobody's talking about it because they don't really see where the money is flowing, and they don't see that the entire thing is basically just ran by billionaires and ran by puppets of billionaires. Every single one of these people on the board is somehow a puppet of a billionaire if they're not a billionaire themselves, or if they're not an elected official representing the head of a government, in which case they're bought out by many different billionaires. That's kind of that's basically the state of the world. That's kind of what's going on here. Let me go ahead and share this tab as well so you guys can see this a bit more. So we already know this was a previous WikiLeaks post. Israeli-aligned billionaire sees TikTok in battle for U.S. narrative control. So we already know that he's purchasing TikTok, so that way they can just realign the algorithm to love Israel. Here's another thing, though, that's pretty shocking. So a regime run by affluent influencers with Palestinians at the bottom. During his second term, Tony Blair considered allowing Israel to take over 5 main settlement blocks in the West Bank, which would become part of Israel. So we already know Tony Blair is a staunch Zionist. All right. As chairman to be on the top of Gaza, he will work in close consultation with the Palestinian Authority, consultation, which means that Larry Ellison will as well. And imagine the sort of sway that Larry Ellison now has over that, aside from the fact that he's also going to be controlling the younger generation on TikTok. So this part is really shocking. Ellison's dark vision for our future. But what is it Ellison and Blair are doing together that is getting a lot less attention, despite the fact that it could end up impacting all of our lives? So not just Palestinians in Gaza. Ellison has donated or pledged a staggering £257 million, $350 million for the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, which appears to be securing him significant access and influencer over the UK government. In late February, when we published a post titled Larry Ellison's Dark Vision for Our Future, and of course it has to go into the fact that aside from what's happening in Gaza, which is going to be Larry Ellison's surveillance across Gaza with Oracle, AI now is going to be heavily pushed in Tony Blair's Institute. Already has been. Tony Blair's Institute is helping developing countries.
Welcome to the world of telehealth. Not sure what telehealth means? Telehealth is a way to see and speak with a doctor or healthcare professional with
develop and attain funding and attain financing. Well, guess what? Now they're backed up by Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, who's pushing AI surveillance. So whenever Tony Blair's Institute is speaking with these countries and helping them develop, they're always pushing Larry Ellison's products. They're always pushing Larry Ellison's AI surveillance to the states that they're working with. It's already happened. This has been reported. This has already happened with states in Africa. So we have Tony Blair's Institute for Global Change that's working in cahoots and as a puppet for Larry Ellison. I made a previous video on it. I'm just going to put it somewhere up here so you guys can click the link later. There were actually individuals from the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, former staff member, that came out publicly and said that the relationship between the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change and Larry Ellison Oracle Foundation is inseparable. Former staff member said she couldn't tell the difference between the Tony Blair Institute and the Oracle employees because they would always come together and they would always have retreats together and they would set up meetings at individuals' houses. It didn't seem like there was any difference. And she started to notice, well, they're heavily pushing Oracle products to these states that they're working with, to these developing nations, and basically creating an AI surveillance world in every single country that the Institute is supposed to be helping secure IMF funding, supposed to be helping secure global investment. You guys see kind of the bigger picture? So we have these billionaire elites and we have these investors that are, trying to secure investments, and of course every single country in the globe wants investments. They want to make their country successful. Well, now what you're starting to see is it's starting to be tied with AI surveillance, and we have people like the founder of Oracle here starting to push his products in the Tony Blair Institute so they can go ahead and sell it to all of these countries. There was actually one official that was being sold on Oracle products that was working with the Tony Blair Institute, and he came out publicly and said he felt like he was being sold. He felt like it was a predatory sale to get a country in Africa to purchase the products or to implement AI surveillance in their state. They call that democracy, guys. That's what they call democracy. That's what they want for Gaza, and I'm seeing people in the comment section and X and everywhere else stating Palestinians better not mess this up. They better not mess up the fact that they're controlled by billionaire Zionists that control them and see everything that they do with their AI surveillance state. This is why, guys, I've said this over and over, and I really need people to understand. If you don't care about Palestinians, well, you just have to realize that whatever is tested on Palestinians is going to be tested on you next. You're next. The AI surveillance that Oracle is testing in Gaza, in the West Bank, in the occupied West Bank, that technology ends up being sold to countries around the globe. It's not just Gaza. It's not just the occupied West Bank. It's all of us. There's examples of this already. Regardless of how you feel about ICE, the technology that Israel's 8200 intelligence unit is producing is being sold off to states around the world. It's being sold off. ICE already back in September, there were articles being published that ICE was using Israeli intelligence software to spy and end up finding immigrants in the United States or migrants in the United States. Germany also bought surveillance technology that's sold by Israel. And the only reason Israel is able to produce that technology is because they have an entire population that's their experiment that they're testing it on. And now Larry Ellison, who basically controls Tony Blair, really controls. If you were Tony Blair, your entire institute is backed, waiting on $250 million from the second richest person in the world. You think you're going to really try to step out of line? Larry Ellison controls the Gaza Board of Peace, at least when it comes to Tony Blair's suggestions. That's the world we're living in. That's what's happening behind the scene. You know, it's disgusting. It's disgusting to know that Palestinians are at the bottom of this, and they're being used as experiments. And this technology will eventually reach us in every single country, every single Western country, everywhere. Everywhere that Israel can get its hands on, it's going to sell and privatize this sort of technology. And that's what's happening in Gaza, and Oracle is heavily behind this. The AI surveillance state that guy is trying to build. Remember that viral video where Larry Ellison's like, no, you can't do that. We're going to have cameras everywhere. We're going to make sure that you're on your best behavior. He's saying that to normal citizens, not prison mates. He's telling normal Americans, we're gonna spy on everything you do and have cameras everywhere to make sure you're on your best behavior. If that's what he's saying to Americans, imagine what he's envisioning for Palestinians in Gaza. And it seems like he's getting his way. So, anyways, guys, that's really it for this video. If you found it...
Ooh, we'll turn some lights on. You can see my ugly noggin. Bit of a worry, eh? It's a hell of a worry. Right, one more episode to go, I think. Looks like it's going to be 5 parts. See how we go.